Good morning, church. My name is Tyler, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm so grateful to be with you this morning. Thank you so much, Brett. And I have a great word from us from Romans chapter 15 this morning, verses 1 through 7. But before I sort of jump into the sermon this morning, we just wanted to take a few moments just to lament, right? To lament over the tragedy that happened in Atlanta. Right, the reality is that a 21-year-old took the lives of 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian American women. And so we're grieving this morning. The Bible calls us to grieve over injustice, to grieve with those who are mourning, to rejoice with those who are rejoicing, right? And so mourning and lamenting and listening in times like these are very important. And so we just, as leaders of CLB, we want to let you know that we stand in solidarity with our Asian American brothers and sisters, right? This hurts, and this hurts for all women too. This is a tragedy. And so one of the things I thought would be helpful this morning is just to create some space to listen, right? This is something we want to be doing all throughout the week. Anytime injustice has happened, to listen and to listen well. And so I asked Thien Olsen if she would come up and just share what's been on her heart this week. I saw a post that she posted this week and talked to her on the phone this week and said, hey, Thien, would you mind just opening up your heart? I know this is kind of scary to come up in front of her entire church family. So it takes courage, Thien. So thank you for coming up here. And so I just want you to share what you shared with me this week and just take us into how you're processing this event, because we'd love to hear from you.
Good morning. Thank you, COB, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. As much as I'm excited to be here, I'm actually very nervous.
It's okay. We got your back.
Forgive me. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Thien Olsen. I have been going to City Life Benson for about 3 years now with my husband, Jeremy Olsen. Today I've been asked to share my perspective as an Asian American woman in light of the recent hate crimes and attacks that have been happening in our country. Mm-hmm. The things I share today is mainly from my own perspective, and it may not truly reflect what other Asian American experience. I'm 75% Vietnamese and a quarter Puerto Rican, so my perspective on racism and discrimination is a bit unique. That I have been discriminated by white people, by Black people, by brown, by Asian, and even within my own Vietnamese community. And so I have this weird perspective where I get different experience as an Asian American being discriminated by people who I feel belonging to and people who I don't belong to, but I call home. When the killing of George Floyd happened last year in May, God gave me this conflicting and unrest feeling in my heart to reflect on racism and what it meant to me on a personal level. And since then, I have been reflecting, and more than often, about how the Asian community have involved in the overall stand against racism and discrimination. Since COVID, a part of me is ashamed to ask for help when I myself have turned the other way, when I have witnessed the hate crime and discrimination in the other community that have endured for generations, way before last year, but I did nothing. It took so long for the Asian community to speak up, it took a pandemic to voice ourselves, that we can too be a target, a victim. Anyone could be a victim. When all around us there were community hurting already. I was taught that my family was all I needed in the world, and everyone else is going to take care of themselves. And that was how I live, and that was how a lot of Vietnamese and a lot of Asian community thrive, because we stick together. But this process of inclusive became an exclusion. When other community are the victims, we stand by and we watch. When my family and I first came to the U.S., we didn't know anyone, and we lived in a community that was mostly immigrants. Some were from Asia, some were from South America, some was from Africa. It was in this period in my first year living in the US that I started to believe being an immigrant was not what I wanted to be. I wanted to fit in. I don't want to stand out. And then when my parent had enough money, we moved to a better community where crimes happen a lot, but at least we didn't look poor. And then I learned that to involve with Black people was to be involved with struggles. And Asian American, we have to stick together. So then we move again to the suburb outside of the city to an all-white neighborhood, and I started to live in this white narrative that Black people are bad and white people are good. I was still facing discrimination, but at least it wasn't in my face. I wasn't jeopardizing. It wasn't jeopardizing my home. It wasn't hurting me physically. Being the only Asian student in most of my classes, racism was subtle. It was behind my back. It was quiet. It was manageable. Whereas before, I was constantly being harassed in the face. I didn't have when we moved to a different school, I didn't have to face the choice of standing up for myself or to speak up. An action that is so unnatural for an Asian person to stand up for themselves. Hate can come in so many different forms. It can be loud, obnoxious, but it can also be calm and still. And so even though I was mostly by myself, being discriminated by my white classmate was easier for me. I didn't have to even admit that racism existed because it wasn't in my face. Like when I was in my previous school where everyone was different, where I was constantly being picked on, fearful, hurtful word, even though I was surrounded by many people who was different like me, who even the same color as me. What COVID has brought out is that it amplified that racism is everywhere, even within the Asian community, and that we are not exempt and we need to finally speak up. In the recent event of hate crimes against the Asian community, it has shocked a lot of Asian Americans to see the increase of report that Asian Americans are being attacked in communities that they feel safe. A lot of us, like my parents, shield ourselves by moving to the suburb outside the city so that we don't have to see social injustice or economic disparity or even to confront racism. But that safety is only temporary. It's an illusion. How can we move forward if we cannot admit there is an issue? And how can we admit there's an issue if we do not see it? As conflicting and confusing and frustrated as I am of what is happening in our country, I cannot help but also find the same feeling and chaos inside of my heart as I try to understand the motive of this man who killed 8 people in Atlanta City. Early last week, I thought to myself, if these bullets that he has shot were really word, would I have stand up and shield them from the victims? Would I have been brave enough to jump in and said something? I don't think I would. And I'm still in that stage of learning to be courageous. God has created us in his image, in his complexity and wonder. We are driven by desire and emotion, so powerful to control. I do not want to justify this man's action, only that I can see the ripple effect he has caused in my heart and our country and our churches. I am overwhelmed with fear and confusion and anger that I am scared that I too will be consumed by it. Because fear is contagious. And it's easier for us to feel that and then to love somebody. What he did was not only raise the topic of race and hate, is also the hypersexual of Asian women, which I have seen from my grandma time during the Vietnam War, from my mother time of owning her own business in America, and to even my own lifetime in college and in the workplace. What this has taught me is to use my voice, that I'm hurt, I'm afraid, I'm scared, but I'm not alone. And I love that we sing that song, that last song. So let us all speak up and stand together because we are all hurting, whether we are the victim, the perpetrator, or even the bystander. It's so weird to ask for help, almost unnatural. So let us together ask God for help, how to love each other. On the night of the Atlanta shooting, our roommate, who's Black and Mexican, she prayed for me in her room. When she told me that several days later, her action meant so much to me. To be reminded that she cared and loved me despite our differences. She has been living with us for like a year now, and it was then that I felt the closest to her. It was her prayer that triumphed what the man has done, and the pain, it didn't feel hurt so much anymore. We all experience racism differently. It doesn't mean that it's not real. It just means that we will have to work harder to understand each other. I lived most of my life with fear until God found me. My mom moved a third time, and now she lives like in the middle of nowhere. Because she not only fear but other things. And so I was like, how do you confront fear if you don't let yourself have the opportunity to face it? That's how a lot of Asian Americans feel. The fact that I'm up here is a miracle.
Yes.
So let us ask for courage.
Yes.
Because racism stems from fear.
Yeah.
Fear of differences.
Yeah.
Fear of change.
Yeah.
Fear of losing control. Fear of standing up, and fear of
Yes.
expression.
Yes.
Fear is in all of us.
Yeah.
But racism is learned. And so let us move forward asking for courage in the word of the Lord. We are never too late to learn to ask for forgiveness, to learn how to know one another, to love each other, and to pray for each other.
So good. So good.